right, welcome to Your Time, Your Money, the show where your time is just as valuable as your money, and we know that. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Exciting guest session as usual.
Guest session. I feel like we got a big hammer. Guest session.
Yes,
Who's
yes.
the sound effect guy, Matt?
Come on, Myers, what's going on over there? Hit the thing.
He does, yeah. I think his switchboard is like 1,000 sound effects on there or whatever.
Nice.
But we have a great topic today, special needs trust planning. Our guest speaker today, our prized guest speaker, Phil Vacchio with Herzog Law.
Newest partner at Herzog Law?
Yes, technically an Esquire.
I'm an Esquire.
At your
He's
service.
been knighted by the New York State Bar.
That accent gives it a little extra credibility,
Yes,
too.
like,
Credibility.
exactly.
You should have a big sword,
We
right?
like to
Tap on
build
the
guest
shoulders.
speakers
Nice.
up when they come in. So,
I'm honored.
I think it's years ago, it was the oddity that you heard of special needs planning.
Right.
Yeah.
And, for whatever medical reasons it is, maybe it's, maybe it's in our food, maybe it's, whatever, atmosphere, whatever it might be. It seems like more and more families need special needs planning.
I think it was more taboo also in the past. People didn't want to admit their
talk
disabilities
about it,
or
right?
talk
They
about
want
it.
to have that conversation,
They weren't
right?
open about it with other individuals. Maybe they were embarrassed because of just how society looked at it.
Yeah.
And the amount of services that are available now for children and adults with special needs, right? The amount of services that are available are tremendously greater than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, right.
It's just much more acknowledged by society as a whole. And those resources come from that, I think.
Which makes it harder, right? Because you have to be careful from the financial end of things that you do, because you don't want to mess up the government agencies and programs that are there to support special needs.
There's a lot of tricky little loopholes you got to know about in that field. So.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe a quick bio. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into law, so that you could be knighted by the Bar Association?
What led to my knighthood, huh?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So if you guys can't tell from my accent in the audience here, I'm from Long Island originally.
The audience.
So my wife and I, my two kids, decided to escape Long Island a few years ago for various reasons, personal reasons, professional. I was a partner at a firm downstate doing the same kind of law, estate planning, elder law mostly, trust and administration. So I moved up here. I spoke to my managing partner, and she was on board to open up a branch up here, which I did. And I rented space from another firm, Ionello Anderson. Are you guys familiar with them? Mostly real estate. They have offices in 4 different cities in the capital region, so pretty big presence, but they didn't do estate planning, elder law. They had iterations of attorneys throughout the years that did, so they still got calls for it, but they didn't handle it. So I was what we call of counsel to them also. So I didn't work for them, but I could handle those types of needs, which was nice when I moved up here, a little steady stream of clients. But then eventually Herzog started seeing my name here and there, and an opportunity presented itself. They approached me, I jumped on it, and it's been a match made in heaven since.
They're a great firm. They do a lot for us, for our clients, and I'm happy you connected with them because ultimately it's going to bolster both of your practices. I feel like it's going to be phenomenal.
It really already has, and they've been around for about 78 years, which is crazy for a firm to exist for that long, and especially in the estate planning elder law field, they really focused on that for at least the last 30 plus years. They kind of pivoted that way. They're one of the first to really focus on this area. It wasn't as, common then as it is now, right? I don't know if it's because of the population or what it is, but so I wasn't always, I've been in this area for about 12 years. When I first came out of law school, I was general practice, a little bit of everything, jack of all trades, but didn't focus. But I always liked the estate planning side of things, started off basic. But I like it. I'm also a double major, criminal justice and psychology. And psychology I liked better, and I'm a great listener. I always consider myself a great listener. And in this area, I'm meeting, 8 to 10 families a day and hearing their issues and learning about their lives and how can I help them. And there's so much appreciation in what we do, and I actually see a direct result when I help a family versus, getting a criminal off of some kind of ticket and see you later. And
I feel like the ultimate, success story for you is that you get someone to an end result that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right.
And he gets to analyze the yin and yang going on
right.
here. And he's already formulating in his head.
Seriously, the psychology behind it, right?
Yeah. Let's center down on special needs planning a little bit. Maybe explain a little bit about what it is or why it's important. Just kind of the people maybe that fall into that category, because maybe some people don't realize hey,
they actually
my
may
relative
fall into it. Yeah.
falls into this category.
It really is an integral part of your estate plan. When you're estate planning, you're creating those documents for your future, but not only your future, your family's future when you look at it, right? Who am I protecting a lot of times? Not necessarily myself. It's my heirs, my family, and it's doing them a service. So when you have a situation where you know that either someone in your family that may be a beneficiary or someone you're caring for has some kind of issues. And maybe they're not even diagnosed yet, but you know something's there. Obviously, there's the medical side of it. You want to get them help. But like you said earlier, there's so many resources out there for individuals.
Tremendous amount, yeah.
Once they are diagnosed. So that you have to have a legitimate disability, a recognized disability, right,
yeah.
to qualify for many of these.
And that comes from a doctor, from a specialist, from
Exactly.
some medical profession that they're going to say, hey, there's something that we have documented that now we can say, hey, this is a legal document that we can provide.
That's exactly right. And then that disability has to be on a list of recognized disabilities that the government has, right? And if I fall under that, then I am qualified for certain benefits because of that disability. SSI, SSDI, extra source of income, Medicaid, certain types of welfare, things of that nature, I become eligible for. But all those assets are eligibility based, meaning, not assets, I'm sorry, all of those programs most of them at least, have an eligibility requirement. Like I only have a certain amount of assets or income in my name to qualify. And those who are more severely disabled in particular, right, and they can't make money or anything like that, if I leave them money or they inherit money in some way through death or through a lawsuit, that could either kick them off of those benefits.
Right, I've seen that before, yeah.
Or greatly reduce them. They might still have them, but they're going to be at a much reduced factor.
Which changes their life completely.
Yeah.
They can't pivot. They can't make changes like that.
Sure.
Especially their family that are taking care of them, right?
Yeah, and they, while the parents are alive or the family's alive, they can handle everything for them. But then they come into this money and they can't handle it, and B, now that money could be going to pay for all these things that the government would have paid for anyway. Medical expenses, having to pay your own medical insurance.
Well, give a real world, Phil. Let's say someone is on SSDI because of a special needs situation, and they've been documented to have it, and then if they are left money, right? They're left $1 million, and it's left to their name. It's not done correctly, right? Yeah. What happens?
Right, left to their name as an individual.
As
so
an
it just
individual.
says to my son, John Smith,
or
right?
Cousin or brother, whatever it is.
Whatever it may be.
Yep.
And it goes directly to them. Now those are assets in their name. And then they're going to have over the $2,000 asset limit that Social Security requires. So all of a sudden, Social Security finds out about this. Well, you're not entitled to those benefits anymore. So you're going to lose that source of income.
Wow.
Until either you spend all that money or do planning yourself. So there are things you can do yourself. If I inherit money directly, it's not the end of the world. In New York, at least, we can create what's called a self-settled special needs trust. Mm-hmm. And we'll take a step back in a moment. But all that means is that I already own the money. I'm the disabled person. It's mine. It's vested in me. And I'm going to create this trust and fund it myself. It's called a first-party or self-settled special needs trust. But there's some negatives to that compared to if my relatives who left me money did advanced planning themselves.
They did it before the money moves.
It's different, right? They're still considered special needs trust, but the biggest difference with this first-party special needs trust that I fund myself as a disabled person is I have to have a provision in there that says when I die one day, whatever's left in my trust first goes to pay back the government, to pay back New York State. So whatever benefits I received over my lifetime, they're going to have to be reimbursed from the trust for those things. And also, after I pass away, my funeral can't be paid for from the trust. Because once I die, it's not for my benefit anymore. I'm not alive. Yeah. So that could be huge. I mean, if I inherited $1 million and I put it into this special needs trust, first party, and unexpectedly or whenever I pass away, there's still $500,000-$600,000 in there.
It all goes back to Uncle Sam.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
It very well could. And that's not the intended result, I would assume, of the original, earner, if you will, of that money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I mean, a lot of times, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a special needs child or relative, you're the one giving the primary care, looking out for their best interest and
all the time and effort.
The money, right? I mean, a massive
the resources
amount of money that might be needed. But when you pass away, it's not just the special needs person that now has the issue of not being helped out. It's who is now that caregiver.
Or who's accountable?
Maybe you haven't had that conversation with a family member of what happens if my son is left and I die early.
Right.
Who do I want to be the caregiver? So you got the caregiving end, right? And then you got the money end. It's like, okay, now that this person's caring,
right, who's going to manage the asset?
How are they going to pay for the transportation to school or wherever that they might have to go, right? So when you establish a special needs trust, do you break out traditionally the caregiving end and the financial end? Do most people group that together?
To a degree, it's grouped together, and there's a lot of discretion of the trustee. Under law, there's allowable uses of the funds, the special needs trust funds, and some non-allowable. The two main ones that the government says if the funds are used, funds in a special needs trust are used for these purposes, it could still affect my government benefits, is food and shelter. Now, when I say that to people, they go, what? Those are like the two main expenses in my life.
Most, man.
That's what I need, food and shelter. That's how I live, right? And the government's point of view, the benefits they're giving are to supplement or pay for those things. And if you could pay for those things yourself, then go ahead. So there are some restrictions as to what they can be used for, but very few. And mostly if it's for the benefit of the individual, travel, transportation, furnishings. A special needs trust could actually even own a house. When I say shelter, it's more of paying for the ongoing expenses of shelter, like rent, mortgage payment, property taxes, right? Okay. Yeah. But like the maintenance of the house, if I want to redo the kitchen and make it more accessible, if I want to get all new furniture, repaint the house, those things the trust funds can be used for. Because they're seen as
upgrade a bathroom, upgrade a kitchen, make it easier, make it more accessible.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So those are good uses.
To know.
But yeah.
Yeah, especially nowadays, you see, Tunnel to Towers and other organizations where, maybe there's a military individual that comes back that's severely disabled.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that house needs to be retrofitted now to, the stoves that lower or the appliances that are.
There's so many things that go into that, right?
Yeah. You don't think about it, in that context as well. So, so somebody identifies and they say, all right, well, I have an individual that qualifies for special needs. They come to your firm and they say, all right, hey, we have this conversation, special needs trust. Who do they need to assign? What's the governance of the trust? What's the protection if maybe that trustee or whoever then passes? Do they assign successor trustees? Like, how's that work for a client?
So that conversation goes a few different ways. When first we identify, is there a potential for special needs? And it's not always that, my son, my daughter, my cousin, whoever the beneficiary is severely disabled now and already receiving benefits. Sometimes it's unclear, right? I have a 5-year-old son who's autistic and on the spectrum, and we can't really tell how he's going to turn out. Maybe he'll be self-sufficient, maybe he won't. So we don't know yet what's going to happen, how severe it'll be. In a situation like that, we're still going to want to discuss the idea of a special needs trust, right? And it could be what I refer to as a discretionary special needs trust. So the term trust in general is confusing to many people too, because on a base level, you also have living trusts that I create and fund while I'm alive.
Revocable trust, irrevocable trust.
So they exist while I'm alive. I can fund them, etc. And then there's testamentary trusts. So testamentary trusts are other trusts that I create through my will or through a living trust. The most common example that people can recognize is if I'm leaving money to young individuals and I say I don't want them to have control till they're, say, 25.
Right, not at 18.
Yeah,
right.
No one wants them to have money at 18, ever.
It'd be gone.
Bad idea.
Ferrari, not good.
Ferrari party, So that's an example of a testamentary trust. My will or my living trust says if anyone is under the age of 25, they don't get their share outright. It gets held in the trust for their benefit. When they turn 25, they get full control over it, right? And until they turn 25, this is the person I want to be the trustee to manage it for them. That's an example of a testamentary trust. Doesn't exist right now, but if certain conditions apply when I die, then it gets formed using that language. So when we have an individual that we don't know how they're going to turn out, right? Maybe they're going to need assistance, maybe not. We can do it through a will or a living trust where we say the language, there's a section in there that says if any of my beneficiaries are legally disabled and receiving and or entitled to receive benefits due to that disability, I want my trustee or my executor to have the discretion when I die to funnel their money into a special needs trust for their benefit.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a lever action where if it happens and they happen to trigger,
boom. Yep. So it's a wait and see approach because we don't know how things are going to turn out. I put that actually in most of my wills and my trusts, because why not?
It doesn't hurt.
We don't
right?
know what's going to happen. I mean,
if your son turns out to be fine, then there's no worry and he can function and everything's fine. But if it ends up getting a diagnosis and has some type of issue,
or even later life. I mean, accident.
For sure.
Traumatic brain injury.
TBIs are legitimate. I've met people and known people that have had TBIs. They can't remember anything within an hour of you telling it to them. They'll forget, right? Dated a girl all through college at TBIs, right? Didn't remember any of the stories I ever told her. So
it's like that movie 50 First Dates.
50 First Dates. Hi, I'm Tom, right? 10 second Tom, right? No, but that's an important thing for people to know. So I mean, really differentiate that, Phil. If you're in a situation where you have a young child and you're not sure, right? There's a way to manage it.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where you have an adult child or a child that you are sure, there's a way to manage it.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's talk about that situation where the person's already severely disabled. We know that either they're already receiving government benefits. We kind of know that things aren't going to change where all of a sudden miraculously they can handle everything.
Right.
Then we may want to consider that living special needs trust,
okay,
where we actually create the special needs trust itself so that it's an existing entity while I'm still alive and can be funded. Or even if it's not funded, I can use it to name it as a beneficiary of other accounts. You guys know all about beneficiary designations, right, in your practice?
Yeah.
So the benefit there, right, beneficiary designation, you avoid court and whatnot, probate when someone dies. I can name a trust as a beneficiary.
So that they don't have to worry about money coming into their name.
Yeah, don't have to worry about money coming into their name, but also we still avoid probate, right? We can do all these things through a will and have no beneficiary or have my estate as my beneficiary.
Okay.
And the will can control and create the special needs trust. But then my family has to go through the formal court proceeding called probate when I die.
Right, and that's a painful lift.
It can be very painful. Even the most simple probates take about a year just because of the timelines.
Right.
So how do we get the benefits of avoiding probate, but also being able to control the distribution of assets and make sure it doesn't go to a special needs person directly? I have this special needs trust that exists that I created. It has its own EIN tax number. I can make that trust the beneficiary of an account.
Interesting.
So it's still going to go directly to that trust when I die outside of probate, but it never goes into the disabled individual's name. It goes directly to
and
the
you
special
avoid
needs trust.
probate.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Well, there's a couple issues that we see there.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of times we'll see a trust that's done up, but nobody ever told them they needed to fund it.
Right. Nothing is in it.
Or
I have a trust.
Or direct through beneficiary designation money going into it.
Right.
And so okay, great, you did the planning, but there's nothing in it,
Right.
and that's a lot of times with irrevocables as well. We'll see that.
Ton of
Oh, I
times
didn't know I
with
had to move
irrevocables.
my stuff in
It's
there.
sad to see that too, right? Because
Yeah, 'cause
they
you did a
thought
lot
they
of
had
work.
everything.
Especially when it's after 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not protected.
It hasn't been there the whole time. But I mean, listen, for anyone out there that is dealing with a situation where they have a loved one, a child, an adult child, maybe someone came back from Afghanistan or from the Middle East and they have a disability, let Phil do the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, and that should
you don't want to wade through these waters.
And that should be in the context also of guardianship.
Absolutely.
Even if your child's not a special needs.
Yep.
Right? I mean, think about it like, both of our kids are under 18.
Absolutely.
And if something happened to us, while we're traveling or vacation or
what happens
convention
then?
or something,
Yeah.
Do you have guardianship paperwork set up, or is it the state coming in, right, and saying, no, they're going to take care of you?
Right.
And what becomes it becomes a battle because ultimately, let's say you don't have guardianship set up for your kids or even a special needs situation. Well, who gets the child?
Yeah.
Who gets the asset? Who's in control?
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing, and the kid's life is already in flux.
Yeah.
That could be true for your kids or for a special needs situation.
And the other thing for our listeners to keep in mind, Phil had mentioned that you have your own EIN number, your own social security number, basically for the trust.
Sure. That's usually the hardest thing for people to understand with trusts.
Yeah, and that
it's like it's his own person.
That brings that asset
entity
to a whole different tax table, though, which a lot of people don't realize that the management of those investments have to be tax efficient.
They have to be.
Because
so
it's
dial
just
that
a
back.
little over 14 grand.
Say that again, Mark.
Top level, right?
If Mark has a trust, it's sitting right there.
Yep.
It's its own thing. Its own tax ID. It's got an address, a date of birth, right? And if it's got investments in it, and Phil helps set it up, right? Yep. And Mark has a trust, and there's investments in it that aren't tax efficient.
And
what happens?
It pays dividends. It pays capital gains.
Right. You get killed.
A little over 14 grand. Whew. You're in the top 37% federal bracket, not to mention state. That's a huge difference than if it's in my own name. and I might only be in the 15,
Right, personal, right?
taxable equivalent of 15%.
The individual.
You're talking 2 or 3 times the taxes on it.
Well,
So
I'm guessing, Phil, that when you do these trusts, I'm guessing you integrate with an advisor and a CPA.
Always,
right?
Always if possible, right? You need the triangle.
The triangle, right? You say literally the triangle. It's usually attorney, CPA, advisor, and they all have a role in creating and managing the situation.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times too, and correct me if I'm wrong, as an attorney, you may not delve into what this mutual funds historically pay down as far as capital gains.
Right.
And
no, I'm going to stay in my lane as an attorney on the legal side.
So, but I bring that up because a lot of listeners, may just think, hey, my advisor's got this covered because he's just going to move my investments in there.
Yeah.
But the advisor may not, specialize like yourself in trust planning and know that, like, hey, I need to be more tax conscious with the products and services.
Probably can't have a super high dividend, and equity in a trust.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the other mistake we see a lot is if the trust is funded, which is okay, right? Is that the investments in there are not very tax efficient.
Right. Sure. Where are the dollars? Where are they located? Right?
Yeah.
And it's a good point too, because the kind of special needs trusts that we're talking about are truly irrevocable trusts. So they do get trusts taxed under those trust tax brackets that you were mentioning. Yeah. A lot of the trusts we do, for Medicaid trusts, we're not talking about those today, or revocable trusts. Those are passed through to the individual. They still claim the income, so they still get the lower tax brackets. But for a truly irrevocable trust like a special needs trust, you have to be very cognizant of that. Once it's funded, it's going to be subject to those higher tax brackets. They're very condensed tax brackets.
Walk me through this really quick so a listener can know if I don't have a trust set up and I have a situation where I have a special needs child or a special needs adult in my family, what's the time frame? How long does it take?
To create
the form written up, but I want to know.
It all depends, right? So once you have a plan in place, you meet and have a plan in place, the documents can be prepared pretty quickly, but then it's a matter of going through everything and checking all the boxes to make sure it's properly funded, that the beneficiary designations are changed. It could be a few months, I would say. Yeah. Depending on how quickly people move.
That's the thing is that I'm trying to preach urgency here because most of the time people don't do anything until when? The last second. Yeah. Until something
crisis
changed.
Mode,
right?
Yep.
I got a bad diagnosis. Something's wrong. Now I have an action step, right? Yep. Oh, sorry. Phil's booked out for 3 months.
Yeah. You want to plan ahead.
I'm pushing my spouse into the nursing facility.
Right. Now. Okay. Can we do this now, Matt? I'm not sure.
We get those daily.
Let me just go right down the hill. Right here we go. There we are.
So, that's a good point. Advanced planning is so important. You do not want to plan in crisis mode. You plan when things are good.
Right.
And you plan for the worst case scenario at that point, not when you're already at the worst case scenario.
Are there things that listeners need to be aware of? Like if money's funded in a special needs trust, you pass away and then that next generation or the other person takes on as caregiver, are there things that they absolutely cannot use that money for that's going to raise a red flag or be detrimental to them on their benefits?
It really is the food and shelter that I mentioned earlier, the two big restrictions. Almost everything else is pretty fair game. And even in that situation, so say I did use the money for food or shelter, for Social Security benefits, it doesn't get rid of them completely. It reduces them by up to 1/3. So I could still be collecting 2/3 as a Social Security. So it's not like I lose it completely. Medicaid is a little bit different. Medicaid I could lose completely if it's treated as an asset, if I void the trust potentially. So we have to be careful there because if I'm paying my own medical insurance, that could be a huge bill.
Well, I mean, on top of that, if money goes right into someone's name that does have a disability, and it might be a cognitive one, are they able to manage those assets?
Likely not.
Are they able to actually make sound decisions? And then that's the next step where the fraud comes in and the issues come in with somebody else that comes in and says, hey, don't worry, I got you. Right? And all of a sudden, millions of dollars are missing.
Well, that's another aspect of the special needs type individuals. And so are there, as a parent, until someone turns 18, right, I can make their decisions for them. That's my right as a parent. Once they turn 18, they're adults, whether or not they're competent or
able to be an adult, right? Yeah.
Someone who has severe cognitive brain issues. Sure. Obviously, even say they're bedridden, can't even speak. Right. When they turn 18, as a parent, you can't make decisions for them anymore. Right. Most people don't realize that. They assume what do you mean that person can't even speak? You have to go for guardianship. You have to become their guardian. There's a whole process. If you have a young individual when they turn 17 or so, you should start the process of being appointed as the guardian of the person and property of a disabled child. A lot of clients come to me, my son's 20 years old and he has Down syndrome and the hospital won't speak to me. Well, Well, yeah, well, because he's an adult and you're not the legal guardian. So to start that process, then we're already behind the ball, and maybe there's an emergency situation. That's not a good situation. That's not a good scenario. You don't want there to be a lapse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you know you have someone with an intellectual or developmental disability, put it that way, you should be aware of that requirement. And even when they're younger, 10 to 15, start talking to attorneys about, hey, what am I going to have to do when my child gets older? You don't want there to be a lapse in time that you can make decisions. God forbid something happens to that child.
Right.
Now that's the
Or the
severe
parent
side.
at that.
Or the parent.
Or the parent, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, let's run down that rabbit hole. I mean, let's say you have a high functioning, a person that's high functioning, that you're setting up a special needs trust for, but let's say that person that's high functioning has children of their own.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work when they pass? Like the special needs trust, can you funnel that down to the kids of that, or does that?
Yeah, you sure can. So more so with the third party special needs trust. So before I mentioned the first party, when you fund it yourself, and the government has to be paid back first when the disabled person dies. If I am the parent or the loved one and I do advanced planning and I create the special needs trust or I leave it to a testamentary special needs trust, it's called a third party special needs trust, not a first party, because the person with disabilities did not fund it themselves.
Right. You're jumping over.
A third party did. So with that kind of a trust, the trust creator has a section that says if there are funds left in this trust upon the death of the disabled beneficiary, then it goes to these people.
It would bunny hop.
So I can say to the children of the disabled person.
I just learned something.
And I can even put rules. Those rules about not getting control till they're 25 and those things.
I do really appreciate those rules because I did have a situation with Jane Marie where we got a call. Someone passed away. 18-year-old inherited $3.2 million. Gone within 3 years.
Oh, it's terrible.
Gone. I mean, I'm talking gone. I'm talking money, vacations, luxury cruises, and all of a sudden you look back and if those dollars were managed appropriately, you set up some immediate income, you set up some growth income, you set up a brokerage account to draw from, right? Like
Set for life.
you're good for life. You literally don't have to work.
Yeah.
But now this person is out of money and should have made way better tactical decisions, right?
And then the overflow of those assets, I would imagine you can even stipulate a charity if you
Right.
wanted to.
Yeah, we
Total
can have an
special
ultimate
need,
beneficiary. If there's no surviving issue and there's no one else I want to leave it to, then dump it into some kind of charitable organization or
Which
something
is great
like that.
because, right, if you have a special needs child or individual in the household, usually some type of charity is working with you
Right.
in support or care. And, that could be a great way that you roll those assets to benefit the organization that's been helping, your situation out, individually. And a lot of people don't think about that, I don't think. And which brings me to the other point, which is why maybe you might want to consider life insurance in that special needs trust or to fund
it's a
it.
big piece.
Right? I mean, if you can benefit the person that you're taking care of, and then also
Create
have
tax
a massive
efficiency,
amount of money
right?
that
Tax
goes tax
efficiency,
efficiently to a charity, you have the best of both worlds.
Well, I mean, you talked about something really important a couple sessions ago, Mark, about what did you call it? When you leave money behind to a university, and you can leave it to a person as well. What did you call it? Man, I can't remember the name of it. Oh, it was a really good idea too. It's when let's say I love Georgia, right? But I also love my kids. I'm gonna spend $2,000 a year on a policy where money goes to my kids, but then some of it goes to the university as well. Yeah. Right. There's policies out there you can do it. I know they have a certain name.
Charitable gift annuities. Will pay you back. They'll pay you back. You're getting the instant tax break, but the organization is paying you back because they're buying an annuity that's paying a monthly payment to you.
I'll remember when we get off the air. I'll probably
That's when it comes to you.
yeah, it'll click. But no, man,
They'll come back in. We'll re-edit it.
Re-edit.
We'll all be in different outfits, different hats on or anything along that line. So,
But yeah, there's many tax efficient things that you guys could do on your end within the trusts, which is fantastic, and that's
right. Tax
really
efficient
important.
portfolios. There's tax efficient. There's a lot of different places.
now
out
a
there that
listener
help
might
us.
also be asking, well, what if I establish it here in New York State?
Right. And
But
then I
now
move.
I'm in Florida, or I'm
Right.
in,
Yeah.
how does the reciprocity with states work, in most trusts in general?
Yeah, so most trusts in general, there is reciprocity. So if the trust was formed legally in the state where you reside at the time you formed it, it's going to be respected in the other state. Normally, the trust also has a language for change of situs, where if we needed to for some reason, we can do an amendment to the trust to change which state is now governing the trust document. And sometimes there's tax benefits to that or whatever other reasons. So there is ability to change that feature by the trust creators. That feature does not survive the death of the creators, though. But then there's reciprocity still between the states, so it's still going to be respected. Maybe interpreted slightly differently, because different states have different tax rules and things of that nature. But the trust itself, the main purpose of the trust and the terms in the trust will still be respected.
I mean, the key takeaways for the day, though, is if you do have a special needs child or a special needs adult, we got to get ahead of this.
Yeah.
We don't want to wait.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have a special needs child and you have just children in general, you probably need guardianship anyways. You should have something set up. Which you do as well.
Yeah,
don't get it twisted. He doesn't just do trust planning. You do the whole thing.
Sure.
Right. You do everything.
Well, I think that might be a good topic too for our listeners. Because a lot of times listeners are intimidated.
Absolutely.
By professionals, right?
Absolutely.
Just in general. So, maybe explain that process a little bit that you work with at your firm. So somebody reaches out and contacts you. Is there a fact finder they have to fill out? What's the
process?
Baby step
That's
approach?
a good question, yeah. So, our firm really focuses on making individuals, A, comfortable, friendly environment, and B, education is huge to us. I never speak at somebody, right? I speak to them. I have a conversation, right? We're going to have a back and forth. It's an educational session, not me just telling you what to do with no understanding of why I'm telling you to do that. That's very important to everyone in our firm.
Not cookie cutter.
No, and it's not cookie cutter.
It's
It has to be
everything's
very specifically tailored.
I'll attest to that because I am a client of Herzog, and they are phenomenal. They take you through everything, even though I knew a lot of the stuff. Some of it I didn't know.
Thank you, Matt.
They're very, very, very thorough.
But somebody calls in from the start and speak to the scheduling coordinator. We get an appointment on the calendar. It's a free consultation, hour free. Even if you don't use us, you just got an hour free education from a professional. And then we
61 minutes if you refer the show on.
Yeah, if you go to 61, that's a huge
1 minute
deal.
and 30 seconds. We'll give you the extra 30 seconds.
But we do send out an initial intake form with basic information about, family, some personal information, a list of assets and income, because that gives us a good idea of your family and financial situation to start with. It's going to make the meeting more productive instead of going through all that initially. So I'm going to have that in front of me to look through first, and it'll give me a starting place. But then I don't go straight to that. We talk about the person's, situation first. Why'd you come here?
Right
in your own words, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
What are we seeking to achieve? And then as we delve down deeper and talk about situations, and I always make the joke, today you can call me Mr. Morbid. That's my job, right? I'm going to bring you down some rabbit holes that you haven't gone down yourself before, some what-if scenarios.
Sometimes I find myself like that at an appointment. I'm like, I'm sorry, we're talking about death again. So I'll let both people be the victim. I'm like, all right, Mark, you're going to get by a bus this time.
Yeah, we kind of keep it even, right? But we have to go down those together and look at those potential scenarios because as we know as professionals, we see those things happen too often. And so we can't ignore them. You don't want ambiguity in legal documents. You want to be specific as to if this happens, then this. If this happens, then this. And also that the right people are in the right roles. You're talking about guardians and trustees. Those are two different potential roles. A guardian of a person.
I made sure to split those roles up in my plan.
Yeah.
I don't want the guardian to be the person taking care of the money.
Right.
I want those roles to be separated so that if, Mark, you have my kids, Matt's watching out for the funds, and you guys got to get together and figure out how much you need. Yeah. I don't want the same person. Right? Then all of a sudden you're in a Matilda situation where the kid's locked in the closet and they got no food, right?
So there's pluses and minuses depending on everyone's personal situation. You may feel that way. Someone else may feel, well, I completely trust my sister and she would never do that and she's the best for both jobs. And if that's your decision, there's the positives to that too. But it really is going through your personal situation and learning about you and your family situation to see what works best. So it goes back to specific tailor. Every estate plan is different.
Sure. And when somebody comes in, are there other documents that they should, put in that mix along with the special needs that you would recommend that kind of help with the estate plan continue on?
Absolutely. I mean, from a base perspective, your foundation is your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy. Everyone over the age of 18 should have those. Yeah. I do power of attorney and healthcare proxies for children. Parents bring their kids in, they're going away to college. What if something happens to my son or my daughter while they're at college? I can't make decisions. I can't help. Let's do power of attorney healthcare proxy. We tell the child, you want to revoke this at any time. When you come back, you can revoke it. You don't have to keep it in place. And that serves a great purpose. So every adult person should have those three base documents at the very least. And then as we get older and we start to get, build our assets, maybe we're business owners, we own properties, we're concerned about liability. When I retire, I get concerned about if I get sick one day. That's when we usually have conversations about different forms of trusts, special needs trusts, as we've been discussing that today, but also trusts for avoiding probate when I pass away. There's a lot of red flags we see sometimes that may make probate difficult for some than others, and also protecting assets. Right, we worked hard our lives. This is what we've
You want to make
earned.
sure you get to the right person.
Exactly.
So
what was the point of it all if it's just going to go to a nursing home or to the government?
So what's the best way to get a hold of you? How do we get our listeners to make sure they know how to contact you? What's the cleanest way to do it?
So easy, right? Call the office, 518-465-7581, or you can email our general mailbox at info, I-N-F-O, at herzoglaw.com. That's HERZOGLAW.com. We're very responsive. You'll hear back from us right away. And we'd love to help anyone that needs our assistance.
Awesome, Phil. Well, we thank you for coming in today, spending some time with us in our digs here. And,
Beautiful place, by the way. Thanks for inviting me here.
And
Wait till we get our live studio. We're going to be up and running live. I can't wait.
That's exciting.
As always, you can reach Iron Tree Financial at 844-444-YTYM. You can find us on yourtimeyourmoney.net for your net worth, or at 43 British American Boulevard in Latham, New York, 12110. And as always, it's your time
And your money.